Um, well, it really starts when I was in high school, and I took a photography course and wasn't sure what I wanted to go to college for, and realized I had a knack for photography. And just through this little high school course, I'd always wanted to be an artist, but I can't draw, and I can't sculpt. I'm actually doing a little better three-dimensional now than I did back then, but and so I wanted to be able to express myself somehow, and it seemed easiest to me to do that through photography. So that's actually why I became a photographer. And I went to Middle Tennessee State University. They did not have a mass communications program. They had mass communications, but they didn't have photojournalism in the early days, and it was more of an art program, which I'm glad I've got that type of training because it really gave me something I think is more of a leg up on a lot of the other photojournalists that were trained classically as photojournalists. So I see life a little more artistically, I think, than a lot of the other photojournalists do.
Can you explain how you began your career out of college?
Yeah, well I graduated from Middle Tennessee State and started out trying to find a job, and it was kind of hard. So that first summer, there was a place, it's now called Nashville Shores, but at that time it was called Hermitage Landing. This was probably before you were born. And I went in there not realizing I didn't have a job in photojournalism, in journalism at all. And I went in there in a three-piece suit and asked them for a job cutting grass, and I carried my resume. I didn't know. I was so young. I wound up being hired as the manager of what is now Nashville Shores, and worked there for 3 months with them having the realization that I wanted to be in photojournalism. And I eventually found me a job at Clarksville. Originally, when I was in school, I worked in Murfreesboro at the Daily News Journal, but they didn't really pay enough to make it a full-time job. So my first full-time job was in Clarksville at the Leaf Chronicle, and that was probably 1981, I believe. And then stayed there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and came to the Nashville Banner, which was the afternoon newspaper in Nashville. And I came here in 1983. So this is actually my 30th year in this building, because I worked for the Banner for 15 years. I've now worked for the Tennessean. The Banner closed in 1998, in February of 1998. And when it closed, the Tennessean hired over about 20 people, I'm guessing. I can't remember exactly. And I was one of the fortunate few that got hired over, and I've been here ever since.
How was it transitioning from the Chronicle to the Banner and then to the Tennessean?
Well, the Chronicle was a small town newspaper, still is, and I really enjoy that type of journalism because everybody in town knows who you are, and you know everybody in town. I went to get my first car and didn't realize, I mean, I was young and fresh out of school and had no credit, and I applied for a car loan because I didn't have any money. And I never will forget, it was like $150 a month, I think, was the payment on this, and I still couldn't get approved. And I waited, and 2 or 3 weeks passed, and I still hadn't heard anything back from the bank. I just wasn't getting approved. And then I got approved, and I asked what happened. I asked the dealer, and he said, well, your form laid there on the desk, and it wasn't going to get approved. And some bank manager came by and said, oh, I know him. He's a good guy. And that's how it got approved. That wouldn't happen in Nashville, but it would happen in a smaller town. I don't know that it even happened now, but because somebody knew me, they had met me at an assignment or whatever, or the JCs or whatever it was. And then when I came to the Banner, you know, you're now in the big city, and you're kind of lost as that cog in the wheel, but Nashville is my home. It's my hometown. So getting back home where my parents were, where my wife's parents were, was somewhat important. And to me, the competition between the Banner and the Tennessean was great. So I was able to take that we were the underdog and fly with it. And I really enjoyed that competition that the Tennessean and the Banner had in those days, up until '98 when it finally folded. And now, you know, our competition, the Tennessean's competition is well, what used to be TV, now it's everybody on the web, it's bloggers, it's television, it's radio, it's everybody. Mm-hmm.
What's your personal opinion about it? Because I saw you had an Instagram.
Yeah, and I used it for a while, and I've kind of backed off of it now, only because of the, and I'm not huge on it because most of the stuff I'm going to shoot on Instagram, I don't really need the rights to. I mean, they're pictures of me gardening or some artistic picture of a door or a window, or I don't know whether you've seen my Facebook. I mean, yesterday I put up one that I was on the way back from the Capitol, picking up a reporter that I'd left down there and just saw the clouds and really liked it. So I took a picture of the very top of the Capitol with all the blue sky and the clouds around it. I'm never going to sell that. I'm never going to do anything with that, and I put it up as my cover on my Facebook. It's just, for me, it's an artistic outlet that I enjoy. It's something different. I would shoot differently for Instagram, differently for Facebook, all those types of things than I would for the newspaper. And I can't shoot that way for the newspaper. They don't need it. They don't want it. There's not space for it. So it just gives me another artistic outlet to have fun with.
Also about the web, how do you feel it is people can pretty much take your photograph off the internet and not really give you credit? How do you feel about the web and the way it's gone with copyrights and everything with the time?
Well, a judge just ruled the other day, as a matter of fact, it was in January, that Instagram is copyrighted. There was a gentleman who worked, he was a freelancer, but he also worked for, he freelanced for several different agencies. And while he was in Haiti during the earthquake 3 years ago, 4 years ago, however long ago it was, he shot his normal photographs, but he also took some with Instagram, and he sent those Instagram photographs back so that people could see. Well, the New York Times and, I don't know, Washington Post, a couple of different places had picked up those photographs and used them. Well, he sued. Turns out he wins because the judge says there's not an availability. You're not allowed to just take those for publication and use those. They're not in the open source. Now, I know the same thing with Facebook. We're having nobody really knows right now what you can use and what you can't use, whether you can use it in context. My understanding is now, if I take a picture of your entire page and show it in context, show that photograph in context, then we can use it. But to take it out of context is kind of problematic. Most of the difference with me is I don't own anything I photograph. I'm a hired gun. As my art teacher in college would have said, you're a prostitute, which I found offensive at the time, but I really enjoyed what I was doing. At that time, film was expensive, cameras were expensive. Now the cameras are expensive, but there is no film. But at that time, I wanted to photograph and I wanted to shoot, but I couldn't afford the paper and the film and all the things that came with that. By joining a paper, they pay me for 40 hours a week. They allow me to shoot. They tell me what to shoot, but they also allow me to shoot some things that I like to shoot. And in so doing, they own the rights to everything I photograph. So all these past 30 years, if I would have shot Elvis Presley and Jimmy Hoffa coming back down in a UFO, it's not mine. It could be worth $10 million. I don't get a penny of it, but I do get a paycheck every week. So I've traded off some things for some other things.
What is your favorite thing to shoot?
People, just average people. I've shot presidents, movie stars, obviously country music stars. I've covered the CMAs for almost 30 years, both the award shows and the CMA Fest. But really, the thing that I enjoy shooting the most is just average people who will never make it in the newspaper any other way. My mom and dad would have never made it in the paper until the day they died and their obit showed up, unless I happen to drive by and see them doing something interesting or see them doing something ordinary but photograph it in an extraordinary way. And then it's a gift that they give to me to allow me to do that, to allow me to photograph them. And then my gift is to our readers so that they can have a little insight into what their community looks like. And that's what I really enjoy, being able to reflect the mirror back on the community so that they can see themselves and see how, number one, the diversity within Nashville has changed, how we've got progress in ethnicity, in business, and inclusiveness. But sometimes it takes the media or me to show that to them, because if they're only on one block and they don't get out very much and they don't move around within their community, they might not know that this new place to eat is over here, or this place has changed and they tore down that building. And that's up to me to be the eyes of the community and show them the things that they're missing, or hopefully enlighten them to the progress that's going on within Nashville. I really like to photograph people, just ordinary people, not really the stars as much, but all of it's part of my job.
Has there ever been any one controversy of an event or subject that you photographed, and how have you dealt with that?
Well, yeah, several. I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was fairly young, I think I was probably I was either in Murfreesboro or at the Leaf Chronicle, and there was a gentleman whose house was burning. And we don't cover as much spot news here in Nashville as we did back in the smaller communities, but at that time I showed up and the guy's house was burning. He's in a wheelchair, and his wife is hugging his neck, and he's crying and she's crying, and I photographed them with him in the foreground and their house burning in the background. Well, I got lots of nasty email, or it wasn't email at that time, lots of nasty letters saying that I was preying on these people, and how could I possibly do that, and isn't that awful that I would photograph this man in this horrible time in his loss, and I'm heartless, and what's wrong with me, and on and on and on. Well, I just kind of took it. I mean, I didn't really know what to say. The man wrote a letter to the editor that said, "No, we're glad he took that picture, because my house would have still burned. I would have still been upset, but without him taking that picture, nobody would have ever known." And because they knew, the community rallied around him. People offered to help rebuild his house. People gave him furniture and clothes, found clothes for his children. They were able to reach out. The community saw a need, and they were able to reach out. But if I had have said, "Oh, that's just horrible, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to take his picture," then they would have never known. His house would have still burned. He would have still been without. I would have kept my mouth shut, but I wouldn't have been doing what the community has asked me to do, and that's to inform them about the world around them. And that's really my job, and that's hard at times, to be objective and photograph the things that are actually happening, and not try to put that filter in there that, is this right, is this wrong?
When you covered the flood, what was that like with natural disasters and just these huge events?
Well, luckily, by the time the flood came along, I'd been doing this for a while, so I was kind of an old hand. It happened on a Saturday, or it started on a Saturday, and I was off. I'd gone out of town to do a fish fry with my church out in Murfreesboro. I knew it was raining, but it's just raining. When I got back, my wife said, "Oh yeah, they've got all this." I turned on the TV, and it's probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you could see the interstate was flooded and people were going crazy. And I said, "Did you not see this? Why didn't you call me?" And nobody at the paper was calling, and which was kind of strange. And I said, she goes, "Oh, I just really didn't believe it." And I said, "I can see it. I believe it." So I jumped in the car, called everybody else I could think of, and took off into town. The problem at that particular point was, wherever you went into, traffic was backed up. So once you got stuck, you couldn't get out. You'd be stuck in the traffic, and I wouldn't be able to cover it. So I mapped out a plan in my mind that I would hit the places I knew were flooding, and I knew that were going to be flooding, and I tried to get an escape route to go from one to the other to cover as much as I could before it got dark, and I did that. I was able to put the pictures in the paper, or get them into the office, and then the next day my boss just told me to stay in Mount Juliet, told other people to stay in Williamson County or wherever they lived, and we covered those areas. I think I went from Wilson County to Sumner County that second day, and then from there we coordinated. I mean, it really depends on a team. I mean, it's not 1 or 2 people doing something large like that. It's really a team effort from the paper's perspective, between reporters, designers, copy editors. It's all hands on deck at that point. And I don't remember how many days we worked straight, but I wasn't supposed to work Saturday, I wasn't supposed to work Sunday, but there's just no doubt about, it was a big event.
How is the competition of being the
You're normally pretty nice. I mean, it's changing a little bit in Nashville, but most of the photographers in Nashville, we've been together for a while. And if somebody's going to mess me up one day, well, they're going to see me another day. To give you an example, when the Tennessean was here, if they ever ran out of film, I would give them film. I don't want to beat them because of some stupid thing like that they forgot this or they forgot that. If their camera had broke, if I had a spare camera, I would give them that camera. They're doing the same thing I'm doing. They're trying to inform the public. I want them to succeed, but I want to be better than them. There's no doubt about it. I want to be quicker. I want to be faster. I want to be more accurate. I want to be able to do just a better job of informing so that when people look for who they want to go to for their news, they can trust me, they can rely on me, they can trust the Tennessean, and we're the people that they look for if they're really looking for that type of thing. There's not really a competition. There is a competition, and we all want to be there first, and we all want to be their best, but for me, to be accurate is more important than to be first. It's getting harder with the web because we're all on the web. I mean, I can roll up on the scene now of an apartment fire and get out with $30,000 worth of equipment. The first thing we do is pull out our iPhone because I can shoot a video very quickly and send it back and get it on the web while I'm shooting my other pictures. So there's just a lot of competition to do a lot of things very quickly right now.
Has there been anything in your career that you covered but it just really touched your heart or it just touched you emotionally? Some event?
Tremendously. There's been a lot. I mean, what we cover is hopefully what's going on within the community. I've covered people trying to recover from brain injuries who were hurt in car wrecks and went with them for months watching their rehab, their rehabilitation. There was a gentleman back in the 80s, very early on. It was hard to find a reporter that would do the story. It was about AIDS. And at that time, you didn't know whether you could get AIDS from a fork or a plate, or if he sneezed or coughed, could you catch this disease that was killing people around the world? Scientists didn't know. No one knew. But I knew that it was a story that needed to be told. We found a gentleman who was dying. Before he contracted the disease, I saw a photograph. He was in his 30s, and I was in my 30s. And he was about my size. I'm 6'1", and he was about my weight. And by the time I met him, he looked like somebody out of World War II. And I followed him for several months and spent the night at his house and ate with him and drank with him and just basically watched him die. And then we did a lengthy story and told his story of how he had contracted AIDS and how it eventually was a death sentence and he died. And that was very tough because it was like looking in a mirror. This guy was just like I was. He was just an average person who had made a wrong choice at a wrong time, and he was having to pay for it. And I just had to watch him waste away. At that time, he couldn't keep food down. He couldn't eat enough, and he just basically starved. And the other diseases took over, pneumonia and those types of things. So that was really tough. I mean, I've seen babies being brought out of fires. It's heartbreaking. Drowning victims coming back up out of the lake that they've recovered. People who have lost a child. It's really heartbreaking, but it's what life is all about. It is the true life of what's going on. And why do we run a picture of somebody who lost their child to a drowning? It's so that it doesn't get lost, that people do realize that these things happen, and that you need to be very careful if you've got a child that's swimming. And hopefully it makes people take a second look and be a little more cautious.
From when you first began to now, what is the number one difference you've noticed in yourself as a photojournalist and with the way the whole journalism has moved?
Well, there's not as much space now in the newspaper to tell the stories that you want to do. I mean, our stories are a lot shorter. They're a lot smaller. They're not as in depth. Before, if you wanted a headline of something, you would go to TV, and they'll give you a minute and a half, and then you move on to the next story. And a newspaper was a place that you would go to get more in-depth part of the story. It's still that way, but not as much so. We're all short on space. We're trying to tell as many stories as we can. The attention span of the younger generation isn't the same as the older generation, so they want to keep moving. Give you an example. Associated Press a few years ago got rid of a lot of their photographers, and they consolidated, and they consolidated around two major themes. And where it used to be news and sports and entertainment and several different categories, it basically has now boiled down to entertainment and sports. That's what people say they want. That's where the money is, and they're trying to keep their model alive, and so that's what they've gone to, give people what they want. I think it's going to come back around at some point, but if that's what people want, that's what you need to do to keep the business alive. But thankfully right now, I believe at the Tennessean, we've had a few rough years, but it's starting to turn. We're doing a lot more in-depth journalism. The stories we've done on the Department of Children's Services are groundbreaking. The stories that we've done here recently on guardianship of elderly people or people that are disabled and how they've been abused. It's the type of journalism that I grew up on, and I'm proud that we're doing it. And it's starting to turn back around. We're getting some new leadership, and it's exciting. It's refreshing.
With that, do you feel the artistry and the integrity of journalism has kind of dissolved? People just want to be popular and get it first without really thinking about how it affects?
I think it can be. I don't think it is. Most of the people who go into journalism go in for a reason. I went in naively to change the world. That's not really my job in journalism. But it is to enlighten a world. It is to enlighten the world in which people live, to show them the world that they are living in. That's my job, to walk into places they can't walk into, to shine a light into a place that they can't see. And that really is my job, and I think that's still out there. Do we have a lot of snags in the road? Yeah. Number one, it's a business, and it needs to make money. And whatever that model is, it needs to be able to hit the mark and make the profit. At the same time, I don't think that's the be-all, end-all. I think there are ways to make a profit, not as much as it used to in the old days, but to make that profit and still be able to serve your community and do it well. The real trick now is that we've lost a lot of the really good journalism people, a lot of the older journalists who knew how to run a paper and how to do it right, and they've been forced out. We're getting a lot of people in now that are younger and don't have role models or people to mold them into the people that they need to be. There's still some in there, but not as many as there used to be. I mean, when I grew up, there were people there to beat me about the head and mold me into the person that I knew I should be, and they showed me how to do it. There's not as many of those still left.
What would you tell any photojournalists that are budding and coming out of college? How do they keep with that integrity and artistry of that photojournalism?
Well, in photojournalism, truth is the only defense. You can change so many things through Photoshop, and don't be tempted, because it's not worth it. If you can't do good photojournalism without altering your photographs, without posing people, without changing the environment that you see, then you're probably in the wrong profession. There are a lot of people in this profession that are doing that, and it's heartbreaking. Because when you lose that trust of the community, then you've lost everything. Why would they come back to me? If I go to a scene and I say, you move here and you move there and you act like this and you do that, well, I've just directed them on how I want them to perform. Don't they assume that every other assignment I go to, I do the exact same thing? That I orchestrate it the way that I think it ought to be? There's no truth in that. When I walk into a situation, normally people will say, what do you want me to do? And I said, exactly what you would be doing if I'm not here. And so I want them to do what they should do. do what they were doing before I was there, and just let me document the event. I'm not sure I answered your question on that.
That's fine. Do you feel people, from my experience, I'm photographing, they freeze up and they stare at me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel people do that to you, and how do you handle that?
They do, and it just takes time. The real key to that is when somebody freezes or they're real, and kids will do this. Oh, they'll come up and they'll wave at you and give it 10 minutes. Give it 15 minutes. Eventually they get tired of you and they go back to doing what they were doing before you showed up. Now you've got real moments. Now the real trick is, can you photograph them doing what they're really doing without making them stop, without orchestrating it? There's the real skill, is can you anticipate? Can you see something about to happen? When people tell me, oh, I saw the greatest photograph, that means they missed it. They didn't have their camera up. They didn't have the shutter open. They didn't, they saw it, but they couldn't capture it. The real trick is to capture that moment in time. And that's the real skill in photojournalism. It's to allow people to be who they are, and you have enough insight through your camera lens, your choice of lens, your lighting, your ISO, whatever skills you're going to use to be able to tell that picture differently than someone else is going to be able to do, but also in a way that illuminates that scene to your readers. And that's the real hard part of photojournalism, and it's also the real skill of photojournalism. If you have a knack for that, and if you have a talent for that, then there's a place in photojournalism. I always tell everybody, they're like, well, there's no jobs out there. There's always normally a job for the top 1, 2, 3, 4%. If you're in the top 1, 2, or 3, 4% in the country, you'll be able to find a job. That's the real key. So out of 100 people, only 1 or 2 get a job. That's heartbreaking. But that's also reality. That means that the cream rises, hopefully, and the best are going to come to the top.
What is the one thing you think photojournalists now are struggling with in the journalism world?
That photojournalists are struggling with in the...
Right. The one thing you look out for and just keep up with, maybe.
Well, just the changing environment. With the digital landscape now, I mean, a few years ago, we didn't even have digital cameras. We were still using film, color, black and white. I mean, when I started out in black and white, and I had tray processing, and I processed my film, I processed my prints, and I put it on somebody's desk, and they mocked it up and sent it in, put it in the paper. When digital photography came around, everything speeded up. But now, I don't really even need to come into the office. I've got a laptop to transmit with. I've got a digital camera with plenty of storage. I can be out for days. I've got a cell card that I can transmit back from a field if I have to, as long as I can get a cell signal. It's just the different types of storytelling have changed. Used to, it was one still photograph, and that's what I looked for at every story, was one still photograph. Now I have to have multiple photographs, because we're going to do a photo gallery on the web. We're going to do 10, 15, 20, 30 pictures of whatever the scene is, and I'm going to put those online. I got to know which 1 or 2 is going to be best for the newspaper. Normally I'm doing a video also. So you're switching from the mindset of I'm only shooting still photographs to also getting audio, to also getting video. You're telling stories in 2 or 3 different ways, all on the same scene within a limited amount of time, and before you have to go to your next assignment. It's a real challenge, but you have to be up on whatever the latest media is. You have to know audio, you have to know video, and quite frankly, you have to know what's coming next. I mean, I'm an old guy, but I'm the first one to adopt whatever the new technology is, because I know that's my future. I'm too young to not adapt. I'm too young not to continue to find whatever's going to be new. And I'm constantly searching, looking for what's coming next, so that I'm not left behind.
Do you feel photojournalists should know how to use film, even though it's completely a digital age?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's great if you can, but it's almost like an art form now. I mean, I see myself at some point being at the crafts fair, leading little kids through a tent and showing them what it looks like to watch a picture come up in the developer, because it's going to be like somebody who makes wagon wheels or buggy whips. It's an old lost art that only a few old guys know how to do. It is. It's a craft. And why would you? I mean, everything that I print out now, if I print out, or most of the things I shoot are either digital on my phone or through my digital camera. I don't shoot film anymore. It's nice to know great concepts. It's good to know your history. It's good to have that as available if you want to do that. But from a practical standpoint, from a photojournalist, it's not practical.
If you could sum up photojournalism in maybe a couple sentences, what would you say?
Photojournalism is just journalism that's told through the photographic medium. You're still responsible for telling the truth. You're still responsible for being objective. You're still responsible for enlightening your community into a world that they either can't see or won't see. Your responsibility as a journalist is the same, or a photojournalist is the same as any other journalist. I feel very fortunate to be able to use the medium of photography to be able to tell that story. My picture's worth 1,000 words, hopefully, and I prefer to write with a camera than I do with a pencil or with a computer now.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean that's pretty much got it. It's a very rewarding career. I've been very blessed to be able to spend my life in this profession. It's not the most lucrative profession, but it's extremely rewarding. You meet different people from all walks of life, from all different cultures, religions, makeups, and I've been blessed that these people will allow me for a few moments to come in and intrude upon their lives and tell other people about how they live and what they're doing. It's just, to me, it's the best profession you can have, and I couldn't think of doing anything else. I've been very fortunate to be able to do this most of my career.